What's up, my bookaholics? We are live today for the next chapters of Dear Dead by Marley. I hope everybody is enjoying their Sunday afternoon. We are live and in full effect. Let's see here. Before we even get started on everything, and while I'm waiting for the rest of the crew to join in, um, how are you guys liking the book so far? That's the question. That's what needs to be, had. Hey, Sean.
Hey, hey.
How's it going, boo?
Oh, it's going good. How about you?
Oh yeah, it's going. It's going. I was
Yes.
just trying to see, who all had been enjoying the book thus far. Just trying to give people a little bit of time to come on in. Come.
Yeah, I mean the book. I picked up some. I think I'm on chapter 6 now. It's picked up.
Okay.
I think. You know,
Yeah.
you still like ah. Oh damn.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Like I told you, it did pick up some, but
Mhm.
yeah. So
It wasn't given what you
it,
was expecting though.
no, child, it wasn't.
Uh,
It still ain't up to par. And I'm on chapter. I've read to chapter. I started chapter 8 now, so I'm on chapter 8. But yeah.
yeah, he
Um.
hasn't hardly brought out. I mean, this has been about his life, so there's barely been any mention of his father or that side of the family and things. So,
Absolutely nothing. Like I was telling you in the beginning, like you give me that one little tea at the end of chapter 1 about Rita Marley saying some negative stuff to you, and then you don't follow through with any of that. And I get it that he was little, but now you're grown, you should be able to tell the story of why you think that she said something like that, or what you found out or something. But yeah, it was a no
yeah,
go.
huh.
It was a no to the go. Um, but anywho, as I was stating before,
It wasn't, I
it
mean,
was
his
it was
life was definitely, ooh, once they got down to Miami, I was like, oh, whoa. Oh,
right.
whoa, whoa,
All right, so let's fall right into it with chapter 3 then, since you get into the Miami part.
whoa.
Um, so in the beginning chapter of 3, of course, he's still giving his mom all her praises. He can't be who he is without her. Da 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 da. The same stuff from the other chapters, correct?
Yeah.
But this is when things start to get a little interesting for him because, um, you know, they were still poor, but they had a little bit more than what they had before, right?
Well, they had an inside bathroom and a kitchen. That's about all he could talk about.
Right, facts.
Nothing. He say that house was worse than they shack in Jamaica. I'm like,
In
damn.
Jamaica. Uh-huh. Yep. So, he talked about, how the house and stuff was in Miami, how, he remember that he was happy to have a bathroom in the inside, but they had a hole in the wall in the floor. It wasn't all that hot. And it was still like lacking what he expected it to be in Miami.
Well, I think that's sad, but that's what a lot of immigrants expect because when they come here, all they've heard about is the American dream and what they've
Hmm.
seen on TV. They think everybody's rich over here and living mansions. You know how they portray what they want to on TV, just like with Africa. They
Hmm.
portray only the poor parts.
Right.
America, they only portray the rich parts.
Right. And that was the thing. So he was expecting more, but every state has their own ghetto. And that's basically what he found out. that he was living in the ghetto of Miami streets. He was living where he could see the homeless. He was living where he could see crackheads. He was living where he saw dope dealers, etc., etc. Well, apparently his uncle was selling weed, and he started to fall into, knowing about selling weed from his uncle. So when his uncle wasn't there, that's when he picked up and started selling weed out of the house. When people started, coming to him instead of asking for his uncle. Eventually, that's what happened. But his uncle was selling weed out of the house, and he was hiding it up under the bed or something. And his uncle would tell him, we not selling today, or we selling today. Like, he gave him, the time frames. So
Right.
and this was all while he was supposedly 6 years old, right?
By the time that came around, he might have been 12 by that time.
By that time, okay.
But he did
Okay.
start passing it, at around 6.
Around at a very young age, right?
Yeah.
What stuck out to me was on page 55, and this is like the end of chapter 4. And I know we're kind of going into other chapters with what we're talking about. It don't matter, it's all the same in each chapter, so just follow us, okay? But he said that something was in the bed with him and his mom. So they still didn't have enough to have more than one bed. They were still that poor. They all slept together. Hey, Ma, I see y'all coming in. Good,
Hey,
thank y'all for
mama.
joining in. And so everybody else was pretty much still sleeping in the bed or whatever. Because remember, this was with his grandma's house when they
Right.
first moved to Miami. They didn't have their own house. That was few and far in between. That was a while later. But
Yeah.
so it was like, excuse me, 9 people being in a one bed, one bedroom home. I don't even think they had but one bedroom themselves with 9 people, which
Yeah.
was crazy as hell, right? But
They had a pull-out bed, a twin bed pushed up against the wall. Girl, they was making it work.
they was making it do what it do, right? Hey Joy, I see you in here too.
Hey, Joy.
So they was making everything pretty much work as best as they could, because they didn't have the financial stability to be able to afford a better home. So, but he was talking on page 54, 55 that he felt somebody in the bed. He asked his mama. He was like, who? He was asleep, she was asleep. She was like, who's in the bed with us? And she was like, it's just us two. Nobody else? No, nobody else, she said. And so he said, he would go back to sleep or whatever. And then he got quiet and she got quiet. And he asked again, is it just me and you in the bed? And that's when he said he woke up the next morning after, she was like, it's just me and you in the bed. It's nobody else. But he woke up the next morning, and his mom finally said, come here, and set him down. I'm reading this quote from the book. When we woke up the next morning, my mom finally said, come here. She set me down as if for a chat to tell me something. She looked into my eyes and said, listen, it was more than just the two of us in the bed. She went on to explain that after I had awakened her the last time, asking her the question, how much of us are in the bed? She felt a presence herself. She said she felt the end of the bed sink in like somebody had sat down on it. She told me that her eyes were wide open, but when she tried to look, she couldn't move or turn her head. She then added that she heard what sounded like someone walking and the back of his slippers dragging the floor. She heard the feet drag all the way down through the house until she finally heard the door open and shut. After this, she said she was then able to look up, but by this time she didn't see anything. It was good to know I wasn't alone and going crazy about this. I don't know how many times something like this had happened to my mother, but it was my first experience with anything like this. for a lot of people who have lost loved ones and who has similar experiences, they can relate and know it's a real thing. For me, it would turn out to be the first of many times that I would have experiences like this. On the real, that moment to me was another defining moment in my life because for whatever reason that I took it the way that I did at that age, for me, that was him. It was my father. And when my mother woke up and confirmed it for me after it happened twice, I knew what it was. I was just like, okay, well, he came and he visited me, and we just left it like that. So he had some kind of spiritual connection that he believed was his father. Because by this time, the father was long deceased.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to go to the funeral and nothing like that. So he didn't get to say his farewell goodbye. And he believed that that was his dad coming to him in spiritual form. But
Yeah.
let me tell you something. And I analyzed this a little bit longer than I probably should have done so because I don't know of the spirits that be able to hold you down. He said he couldn't get up. He couldn't look, turn his head left or right. That reminded me of the witch riding you. You ever heard of that?
Yeah, but some people they have like sleep paralysis.
Right, right. And
So
I do understand the sleep paralysis, but I'm not even going into a scientific method with this because I told y'all that I had the witch riding me before. And I think we talked about this on live before too. I don't have a problem explaining it because to me it just when he said he couldn't move, that's what it reminded me of. But he didn't say that anything was on top of him holding him down. They specifically said that the end of the bed sunk in as if somebody was sitting on it at the end of the bed, and then you can hear them walking, the back of the slipper sliding on the floor, and the door opening and closing. That doesn't really necessarily strike me as the witch riding me, but that's what it made me real believe. Like, oh, wait a minute, you can't move. You know what I'm saying? You like was somebody holding you down? Why you couldn't move your neck? Like literally when you have dreams or from what I've heard from people that are visited by their loved ones or something, it's it's not preventing you from moving. It's just like like you visually see them as if they're right there, like they never left,
right.
right?
Hmm.
Joyce said, I think almost everyone at some point has experienced this. Yeah, and for me, it was the rich riding me, Joy. But I've never had like my grandparents or anybody come to me spiritually or anything like that. I've never had that I can remember a
Right.
spiritual connection to a loved one where they held you where you couldn't move or something. That was my thing, and I felt like that was a little odd that the spirit did that. Like, why would you hold them still? If you believe that this is your father coming to you, he will want you to be natural, like you normally would be around him. So that kind of, that kind of gave me a I don't know if that was Bob.
Mm.
In my own personal belief from reading that, I didn't think that that was Bob. It could have been. They moved into that house. They weren't in that house a very long time after Bob had passed. So, and I don't believe that Bob ever came. Did Bob come to that house? He never came to Miami. He was long gone. The only house he ever visited was the one that they were in Jamaica. And not to say that the spirit can't travel. We know the spirits, ideally, if you believe in that type of spiritual connection, they can travel. You don't have to be in one house for them to travel you to another. But that's not what I'm saying. But that made me think that it was a different type of spirit.
Right.
That didn't make me feel like that was Bob.
Well, they felt like it.
Yeah. So who is this that said? So Joyce said, someone used to visit me occasionally, but one night I got really scared and said, go away. And I've never experienced it again. I often wonder who it was. Yeah. They used to sit on my bed and I would feel something run across the bottom of my bed. Interesting. Have you
Shoot.
had your loved ones contact you before, Joy? Like a loved one that has passed on? Have you ever had them contact you? And if so, do you remember talking to them or interacting with them? Do you remember them like not being able to allow you to move or something like that? That's why I said I felt like it was a different entity. It was not, I didn't feel like it was Bob. She said yes. Okay, okay. And they've held you down where you couldn't move before too? Because
I never
that
had
seems
nobody hold.
strange.
I mean, I have been asleep before and felt like I was paralyzed and couldn't move,
Mm-hmm.
but I never, that I know of, experienced a loved one or somebody trying to contact me.
Right. And she said no paralysis. Okay. So she didn't have it where they hold them. And that's why I said I have never heard of a spiritual connection from a loved one that gave you either the paralysis or was holding you down and you couldn't move. Like that was really eerie to me. So to me, in my own personal opinion, I didn't think that that was Bob, but that's what they consider it as. They considered it was Bob. So, and he didn't go into anything else in regards to it. He just left it up to that. He felt like his father was around him and looking over him, basically. But that just was strange that it held him down. It wouldn't allow him to move. She said, I've had my mom visit and my grandfather, my BFF, and a few others. Okay. Okay. So see, and it's pretty consistent of the same thing. They're not holding you down. You're not having any paralysis or anything like that. And that's what I consider a spiritual connection with your loved ones. It's just like they're really there in natural form and physical form to you, and they're coming to you and you fully see them and y'all engage, y'all have y'all connection, whether it's a talk or they're showing you something visually or something like that, but they don't hold you down, they don't prevent you from moving, and that threw me off. So I believe it was a different entity in that dang on house. And it could have been maybe somebody who lived in that house prior to, because where they stayed at, and I'm connecting the dots. Give it to me. Let me connect it because I know it sounds far-fetched. Where they stayed at was just like a war zone. People were shooting each other and dying, and it was drive-by shootings and stuff like that. Because as we get into chapter 4, you see how I brought it back around, Shine?
Mhm.
As we get into chapter 4, he starts to tell us of an incident that occurred, unless I passed it up. An incident that occurred where they got into a shootout, right? Was that before or after this chapter?
Offhand, I don't know if it was
Okay.
before.
But he did. He got into a shootout. It's like two people, their neighbor that was in his backyard. One was in the backyard, one was on the same street of them. They got into an argument. He was sitting on the porch and they started unloading gunfire between his house. Like the bullets and stuff he told us was flying by his head as he
And
was
he
sitting
was
on the
just sitting
porch.
there watching, like
And
he
he was
watching
sitting there watching it. He didn't take cover. Didn't nobody come out and tell him, get your ass in the house. None of that. Like, he's literally in the middle of crossfire between two neighbors and they having a shootout. So if this was the type of war zone this was in the community of where he was, there's no telling who actually came to him in that house. And that's why I believe that. I didn't think that that was by Marley. I didn't believe it. But okay. All right. So anywho, we're in chapter 4. Let me see. It says, when I heard about the possibility of moving to America, I was excited, but I swear after the first morning I opened my eyes in this new promised land, I would have run all the way back to Jamaica. Now, remind you, we told you he didn't care for this new place in Miami because it was just as ran down as it was back in Miami. I'm back in Jamaica. He said leaving Jamaica became a possibility through my grandmother. My grandma was a nurse in Jamaica, and her mother and great grandmother lived in America. Specifically, she lived in Miami. She had gotten her papers and said, we think America is where you're going to find your pot of gold. This is why the grandmother moved to Miami, and then she brought who she could bring. Kaimani's mom and him had to stay behind a little bit longer to get things together before they were able to move. But eventually they did move. And that's how they ended up being in that one bedroom house together with 9 people. because literally it was like his, his aunts and all of them, his uncles in the house or whatever. And he did say it was like a 2.5 room house for all 9 of them. And he stressed that throughout this chapter 4 about who it was. So he said it was me, my mom, my 2 aunts, my grandma, my uncle, and a whole crew of cousins. We have, like Sean said, we had the pull-out couch in the living room and another twin bed on the wall. It was like some real refugee living. And this is how they ended up living in that house for the longest time. That was pretty much chapter 4 of him explaining to you how they lived in their new Miami field home. Now, again, I told you that we kind of jumped the gun on some of this stuff because chapter 5 is where he gets the rude awakening about this community. These motherfuckers out here is crazy. And this is what he states as a conclusion 1 through 5. Did you get a kick out of the conclusion, Sean?
Girl, child.
Like literally, I told you these chapters were really short and like it said similar things, and you basically had to pull out the information of what he was saying. But you guys, literally, I'm not making up how he said conclusion 1, conclusion 2, these motherfuckers is crazy, and then he goes to conclusion 3, these motherfuckers right here, boss, oh yeah, they crazy, and then he goes
Yep.
into the whole breakdown of how they are crazy, and that's when he ends up telling us about the shootout that happened between the 2 neighbors, and he was sitting there in the middle of it. So his first experience with this wild and violent community was not what he thought that Miami was going to be, because of course they show us the glitz and the glam of Miami. You never think that, but each state has their own specific ghetto. You know what I'm saying? Like every state is not full of caviar dreams and champagne wishes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, he said he was able to view a stabbing while he was there. When they first, and this is when he first got there, he viewed a stabbing. He saw a dead body somewhere. It was murderers and stuff all on the news. It was stuff popping off all the time. It was the type of community where you just wanted to survive, and it was your mind your own business. And this is what he translated it to meaning. Mind your own business. This means, translation 1, when the police come asking questions, walk the other way and shut the fuck up. Okay. Translation 2, when you see somebody doing something that they don't want you to see, you act like you ain't seen shit and you shut the fuck up. Okay. Translation 3, if you got beef, call your people and stay strapped the fuck up. This is what they say. This is what he considers the secrets of success when it comes to surviving the streets of Liberty City, Miami. Ain't that cold blooded?
Girl, that was the ghetto.
The ghetto. He said it was drugs flying, all around this community. And that's when, and this was what, chapter what? What I say? Chapter 5. Hold on, let me go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is in chapter 5, yep, where he started to notice that his uncle B were doing sidebar jobs to help pay for bills. And that's how he found out that he was selling, and they call it herb. They don't say marijuana, they don't say weed, they say herb. So he was like, for us in Jamaica, it's a normal part of life. But here in America, because he even told us about an incident where they got pulled over in Jamaica and he had weed on it. They don't care about that in Jamaica. Everybody does it. So they're not quick to arrest you, even though it is illegal per se. But
Right.
for them to do it here in America, you could get locked up for years for this shit. And that's when he found out that his uncle B had been, doing the side job hustle to be able to pay for bills and stuff like that. And he gets into the craziness of how, his mom, and maybe I might be going too far into it, because his mom got tied up into it as well. So things naturally progressed for them. And before he knew it, when Uncle B wasn't around, The customers acted like they didn't care, and they didn't. They were crackheads. And he said that's when there was the thing about the weed, and eventually the customers didn't even bother asking for B anymore. They just started coming to me directly because at this time he started seeing how his uncle was operating, and when his uncle wasn't there, he would go and get the weed from him. They would give him the money. He would go and put it back in a jar. So he was kind of taking over the side hustle game for his uncle when his uncle wasn't there, and people started to notice, hey, the little boy got the weed, not Uncle B. And then that's how it started to be where wasn't nobody asking for Uncle B no more. They was asking for little man. They was asking for him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was wild. But it is the hood, so it's not absurd to hear stuff like this, but it was wild. So now he says he's not even 10 years old yet and asking a grown man what he want. Nickel, dime, little bag, nickel, big dime, a big bag of dime. It wasn't rocket science. After the man stated his presence, I go get it from the jar, give it to him in one hand, and hold out my hand to collect, and he would pay me. I take the money, I will put it up somewhere until my Uncle B came back home. Done. It's over with. He said, I sold my first baggie when I was about 8 or 9, and I don't even think my moms knew at that point because we were still getting settled here. She didn't know the difference in the consequences here versus how it was in Jamaica. It was nothing for us. So after a while, it all just became second nature to me, and it was just what it was. So I ended up doing this right through school, all easy, no problems. If we needed money to eat and couldn't make it anywhere else, we made it on the block, period. We most definitely weren't going to starve. Nada, not an option. I'm not really even thinking about the fact that I could go to jail or juvenile detention for this. 3 years later, I'm 12 years old and have been doing this for years without any problems. I was selling product out of the house like it was candy. I had become official and it was part of the program. But eventually, things turned for the worse. Okay. And I'm just skipping the part that he's telling us or whatever. But somebody came up the side of the house, the front of the house, as if it was a robbery. And they were like asking them for the weed.
Right.
And
And
he
his
was like,
uncle told him no selling today. I guess his uncle knew some shit might pop off.
yeah, I think his uncle was going out of town, right?
Well, he didn't say where he was going. He just said he was on his way out of the house going somewhere on a run.
Okay.
That must have been extremely important. But before he left, he told him, listen, no weed, ain't selling out the house today. Got it?
And he said, okay. And he was like, cool. But some people came up the side in the front of the house and he saw him. He was there with his little cousin David. They was playing, they was watching TV. And he said he hear the back gate squeak open. One of them comes into the yard, and now I see the other one making a left, heading around the front door. Okay, fine, customers. They're entering the yard in an odd way, but I got it handled. This is what he says. So I watched the two people walk into the yard for two different directions. Interesting, but no problem. It's just some people coming asking for weed. Been there, done that, right? Honestly, in the moment, this is all kind of strange to me, even as a kid. But in my head, it's still not registering. The whole picture hadn't come together yet. I might have been helping to hustle weed out the front door for the last 3 years, like I was a seasoned pro, but I'm still just 12 years old. I'm not yet quick at this point, but I am quickly developing. Oh, please believe. Before I know it, one dude at the front door is knocking, bam, bam, bam. So I'm cool. All I gotta do is restate what Uncle B told me. No weed today. I open the door. I see his face. I didn't know him. I looked up at him, and it just was what it was. No problems. He spoke his business. Where the weed at? He asked me. Okay, fine. Just like I thought, a customer. So I said, ain't no weed here. Yeah. Nah, no weed. He didn't seem to be moved by that. He's still standing there. He not going about his business like the rest. And now his partner is present. He fixed his face squarely and then said to me again, "Where the weed at?" So I answered back saying, "There's no weed here." Now, in my head, I'm hearing my uncle tell me, "No weed is selling out the house today. There's no weed here." That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Plus, I'm still stuck on the thought that they're coming to buy weed. But this idea is quickly eroding my mind, especially now that they are all in the way of my house. Like they're inside the house acting like they couldn't understand the English I was saying through my Jamaican accent. What is it about there's no weed here that they are not getting? So this kind of goes back and forth for a little bit. And then eventually he was like, "Well, fuck it. I'm just going to go to the jar and show him ain't no weed." He goes to the jar. He comes back and he tells him there's no weed. He said, but he does says that he knows where he keeps the stash at. His Uncle B keeps it under the bed in a suitcase on the floor. And they were right, since the house was super small, they were right there. If they just looked under the bed, they would have found it. But eventually he goes to the jar, he comes back and he tells him, he said, "There's no weed here." And he shows them. And then eventually they left. But he don't know who he was facing. Them was some robbers coming to rob them out the weed and the money.
Right.
And he is just a little tyke dealing with stuff like this. That could have been a whole shooterization. If they didn't believe that little boy, they could have took him and his cousin and held him for hostage and everything. Like this really could have went far left than what it was.
Girl, I think they must have seen their uncle leave and thought they was about to hit them a quick lick.
Right. Exactly. So eventually he ends up, when his mom and Uncle B come home, he tell him about it. And she is pissed, the mom. She is super pissed that she was like, she grabbed her strap and she said she'll be back. It was a 38 snub nose revolver. Her homegirl was on her thug and she went out to go, I guess, look for the people who was, coming in there that on her son like that, which I get, but that's like a needle in a haystack in the hood. And if you going about your business like he told you, the translation was, ain't nobody gonna tell you shit. So
No.
she didn't get no information. She left out the house, and eventually when she came back into the house, it was like evening time. And he said that he could remember just it was just getting dark outside, and she immediately comes in and gets me and takes me into the backyard. And I didn't know what was happening. I'm standing there and she hands him the gun. So this is his next adventure of learning how to shoot. She wanted him to be fully protected. She know that what they're doing in the house is bringing bad type of environment to the crib. So now she wants to show her son how to protect herself. So she tells him, raise it above your head, pull the trigger one time. And so he does so. And this is how he ends up getting into liking guns too.
Well, look, your mama Anita was a real one. She like, I know where we live at. He gonna need it.
Right,
Gotta be
exactly.
realistic.
She had to. So she
Right.
had to teach him about using a gun and protecting himself. Which, even and I'm gonna say this too, I don't think that you should not teach your kids how to use a gun. I think that that is an important part of life. Um, People show their kids how to hunt and use a gun at a very young age. And I think that all of the kids should have that proper training of being able to handle themselves so that they won't be out here doing frivolous things with guns and stuff like that. They know that this is harmful. You're teaching them right way to maneuver a gun in the event of safety. They could be fully prepared. You know what I'm saying? So I'm one of those ones that believe that you should teach your kids about guns and instruct them. the proper
Yeah,
way of
I have no
using
issue with that. I mean,
it.
the
Yeah.
issue I have is people allowing their children to have free access to guns. That is
Oh yeah,
inappropriate
no,
and
no.
wrong. But
Yeah.
teaching them how to use them, I see no issue with. That's how these kids keep getting into schools with guns. Why? Because they have access to them. They should not.
Yeah, yeah. So I really commend her on taking the time to teach him about using a gun and stuff and protecting himself because in the environment that they were living in, it was like do or die. So that was a must. Um, but eventually, after her showing him how to use this gun, you know, he started, hanging with his crew. And eventually they wanted to make their own money from hustling. So this is where the stuff starts to turn into a real thing because he like fuck it, ain't nobody coming from asking for Uncle B no more. They really asking for me. They know that I hand it, and I have to figure out a way now. Me and my fellas, we know how to use a gun. We got guns. Da 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 da. He starts to make a business out of the business, and he eventually starts to steal his uncle's stash and start to sell it between him and his boys amongst the block. Child, his uncle didn't even know none of this was missing. Now that's how strange that is. Like how you got a stash and you don't check up on your stash and know that something is like a little bit off on it. But that's what he
Girl, they
said.
was shaving them some crack off. They were shaving it.
Yeah, they was shaving. They was actually, shaving off the weed and splitting it amongst him and his friends and selling it. And they got really popular, but he wanted to move up. He wanted to get into the crack shit because that was what was really the big money. Okay? That was the big money. Child. Him and his boys, they were doing some scandalous stuff. People were buying the weed from him. So when his uncle would shut down for the night, he go to bed, act like he was going to bed, and then at midnight he would sneak out of the house, and him and his boys would link up, and whatever he shaved off of his uncle's weed, he would go through and he would sell it on the block. So the crackheads started noticing that the business was being ran later than what Uncle B was setting it up to be. So they started coming to him and waiting at night, midnight, to come to Little Man. And that's when we get into chapter 6. Oh my God. These little 13-year-old kids, honey. I laugh at this whole thing because they was just really bad. So okay, so he's doing the sidebar hustle. His uncle is doing his sidebar hustle. His uncle is doing it from one particular time till at night. And he's picking up the midnight shift till whatever, and then he sneaks back into the house like nothing ever happened, right? Well, now they're looking at this whole thing because crack is starting to be lucrative in the neighborhood. People are starting to look out for this crack that's coming around. He know that you can make big, big money with the crack. Well, Whitney said crack was whack.
Girl, it was. She knew
It
what
was
she was
whack.
talking about.
Okay. But so this is what he says, and just to paint a picture for you, it's Miami. We're in the ghetto. The temperature is bubbling. The mood is violent. At that time, my block is hot block in the area. Everybody hangs out on my block. Everybody. There's a resident crackhead who lives across the street in the bushes, and he got all kinds of fucking traps and stuff set up because he's an ex-military coming from Vietnam, I'm sorry, where he learned all of this shit. He set up all kinds of booby traps for the police. I remember walking through the bush one time and just hearing some dude screaming, "Oh no! Oh no!" This crackhead dude had dug a 4 foot to 5 foot hole with sharpened pegs and shit sticking up from the bottom. Then he covered it with leaves. He was out of his mind. He said, "That's for them pigs be running through here to fuck them up." Then he started laughing. I'm guessing he was tired of being harassed by the local police. God forbid some little children were playing around there, but this is the tone of my neighborhood. My neighborhood is virtually all juveniles. Although there were some adults in the neighborhood slanging and doing what they do, it's really us, the juveniles, who had the control of the neighborhood. And a lot of the adults didn't really realize how dangerous we kids were. They really didn't know what was going on below the surface. There were 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14-year-olds roaming the streets, and all of them were strapped, but nobody knew. For us, it was no different than when nations proliferated. I mean, seriously, what's the difference? If Israel gets strapped up on a nuclear tip, then Iran is going to try to do the same thing naturally. And if you have some beef with some heads across the street and they're trolling with some heavy metals, then what do you have to do? You got to even the playing field and balance the tension out and get guns. So this lets you know the mentality of these juveniles and how they were operating the neighborhood in the community. They was cold blooded. They was cold blooded, and they didn't care. They didn't care. They was at the point where they take it to you no matter what. Oh, excuse me, honey. I didn't get that these was going to be some soft type of teenagers if they're already toting guns and selling weed and trying to get into crack, right?
Child, that was normal for that
Right,
area.
girl, that was normal.
Yeah,
And then
it's
he tells
sad, but
them,
it's true.
right? He tells them that they have the types of guns that they were holding: a 380, a 22, a old rusty 38. He said the dudes were across the street were coming for real dope money. Because at this time, it was getting hot on the block and things were starting to escalate because this crack was coming into the community. So he said that his uncle, hold on, I'm trying to make sure that this is when the uncle ended up getting some guns or something. Okay, so some let's see who
It
bought
was the
the
uncle on his
her
dad's
father's
side.
side, right?
Yeah,
On the
who
father's
got the
side,
gun.
that
Yeah.
got a whole cache of guns, AKs, M16, 9 millimeters, 40. They had a whole collection. And but I'm the one who's still living in a war zone. So he went to his other grandma's house on his dad's side, which is my dad's mom. He said everything was so nice and peaceful over there. All of the damned houses were big with manicured lawns, and you didn't see any neighbors. You just saw little white kids riding down the street on their go-karts and all things in life that was supposed to be. But that wasn't where how his life was. But anyway, he sneaks into the house without being seen. He grabs him them guns and he sneaks out, right? And he heads back to his side of town. He said so he ended up getting him and his boys some guns. He got a Glock 15. He got a 10 millimeter, not a 9 millimeter, a 10. Okay. So he pulled up on his boy in the street. He give him the 9 to hold. My other boy got the 40. So now, please believe we are back on the block, fresh beams and everything. And we were thinking, oh yeah, it's gonna be serious problems out here if it becomes a shakedown. They're telling you they strapped, they ready for whatever because they knew that they trying to elevate their business. They want to get into the crack business, and they believe that the only way that they're going to be able to protect themselves is to get heavy artillery. Okay, so then he got his boy comes to him and said that one of his friends or whatever, or relatives or something, uh wants to buy the AR-15 off of him, right? Child. Or the AK-47, whichever one. He want to buy it off of him. And in exchange, he want to give him coke. Now, this is how young they are. He was like, he didn't want the coke. He wanted crack. Now,
Shit, they know who their customers is.
I mean, I know that, but coke is more potent than crack, and you get more money for coke than crack, Sean.
But crackheads don't want no damn coke. They want crack so they can smoke it right up.
If they would have dished out a little of that coke and gave it to them crackheads would have been coke heads. Do you hear me?
Girl.
What I'm saying is coke is more potent. It gives them a better rush than crack. Crack is actually a breakdown from coke.
I know that, but the people wasn't into that back then.
But if he was really smart, now this is why I was saying, he's really young, he's not knowing. And he tells you in the book, he didn't realize that coke was the better drug and he could have got more money for dishing out the coke. But he tells his boy, all right, tell him I meet up with him, but I want crack. I don't want coke. And so they have a meterization. They meet up and he said, okay, I'm going to give you this coke. And he tell him, I don't want the coke. I want crack. So he watches the dude break the coke down and turn it into crack. He gets the crack, he gets the gun, and they go about their own way. So now he done elevated himself into selling crack in the neighborhood, and this is how it began.
Yeah.
And that's literally the chapters. That's the end of chapter 6. He ends up getting guns for his friends. He ends up elevating and getting a crack and everything, and he's selling crack out the house. Out the house, this little boy. Okay. So this is what he says towards the end of chapter 6, and then we are out of here. Looking back, I've always had a fascination with guns, and I don't know if fascination is a word I'm looking for, but it is always something I felt comfortable with. And while growing up, it was most definitely something that I felt was a necessity. The straps were going to stay. The other dudes on the avenue had theirs, so therefore I needed mine. That was the neighborhood, that was the regiment under which we lived. That's what took place. And the bigger heads, the dudes, the hustlers on the streets, they taught you this. It was an open air market, and I wanted some market share. I was doing what I felt I needed to do to come up. I continued heavy and selling the herb, of course, but I stopped messing with that other thing because what happened was, let's talk about it. He started selling the crack, and things got a little bit sidebar crazy for him, right? So after I'm not trying to go back to the page so I can fully tell y'all exactly what happened, right? The Okay, so the boy wanted he said an ounce of coke. We don't need no coke. What about the crack? We kids, right? And I'm telling you, this is the real conversation right here. We don't know yet that coke sells on the corners, but we for damn sure know that the crack sells, right? So my man said, all right, let me go around here, right? So this is where he tell him he want the crack and not the coke, and da 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 da. They make the exchange. Homeboy breaks the coke down and turns it into crack, and then they leave and they go on their way. The crackheads just didn't cut off. They were fiending 24/7. So while Uncle B was gone, we were doing our thing and making money, a lot of money. Like I said, we moved up. This is him selling the crack. So now we had it. We had a system. It ran like clockwork. When the bigger heads went in, the little heads came out. When the bigger heads were sleeping, the little heads were making up the block, waking up the block gang. And there was a lot of money to be made. I didn't know if the adults knew how much paper we were leaving on the table, but we knew because we were scraping it up. This shit was working. We were stacking, we were not in big chips. I was about to go get a whole bag of rubber bands. You hear me? It was fresh on the block, boy. It was all good. Well, until Uncle found out about it. So they got busted. This is what happened. And he started to having to go back to just selling weed. But he got busted. After a while, my uncle starts getting word about some new product on the avenue, and this is not good. Or you could say it is good when you look at the long-term effects. For me, at least, I can't say it went for the same for everybody else, but he found out, and it was all put a serious pause on my paper run. The neighborhood talks. It's natural. how it happened was indirectly. We were getting good pub on the block. Excuse me, but all good publicity ain't good publicity. Not in our case. It was one of those same crackheads popping off at the mouth who led to it all being shut down. He lost out and we lost out. The crackhead hit up the corner one day to buy some rocks, but he didn't come on our block on our clock. But like I said, crack don't have no clock. Crack doesn't sleep day or night. Crack burns when it needs to be burned. So the crackhead hit the corner to get the rocks he used to getting, but we weren't there. So the crackhead had been going to them. They weren't there, so they had to go somewhere else to get the crack. And when the crack dealer who was there tried to sell him rocks, the crackhead told him, "No, no, I don't want it from you. I want to see them jits, them jit shits, way fatter than any other shits out here. They used to call our asses jitterbugs." And we were getting a reputation among the crackheads because we cut up the coat into some fat ass rocks. We were up pending the market, and his remark was, "We got us busted for for what we were doing at night." Word went out. We were exposed in two ways. We were exposed that we were out here actually in business for ourselves. That's one. And we were out here selling crack. That's two. Fat crack at that. My uncle caught wind of it, made it clear that he disapproved. Then later I was slipping and left some rocks on the bomb laying out. My mom's found it, and of course, this sent her off the racks. She went into full panic because she immediately thought I was smoking crack. I had to calm her down and explain, "No, never." I told her I was selling it. This wasn't good news, but it was way better than the first assumption. My mom and uncle strongly let it be known that they thought I was playing way out of bounds, and they didn't want me doing that. At that part, he had to let it go. That crack was something different. And when I saw my family was really, really pissed off, upset, and disappointed about the fact that I even thought about taking that route, I was taken basically aback about the whole thing. And that's when he started to stop doing the crack and he let it go. So he got busted by his family.
Yep, and your mama said you can't be selling crack no more, boy.
That was a wrap. So he said he went back to selling herb, of course, but he wasn't messing around with the other thing. My boys, many of them went on and bigged up. Not a lot of them are living today. Listen to this part because this part was really interesting. Others were eating up time behind bars, and some of them eventually passed away from their dealings, and it was fucked up. So he had a soldier's roll call list of all his friends and what happened to his friends. He said Kirk currently incarcerated. Courtney, aka Bird, currently incarcerated. Dwayne, rest in peace. Jerome, rest in peace. Screw, legally employed with family. Al, rest in peace. Wayne, still hustling. Deke, just released, legally employed. Nose, still hustling. Skinny Man, incarcerated, life sentence. And Irving, featured twice on First 48 on A&E, but back on the damn streets. oh, oh my
Girl,
God.
I'm
Did
like, who
you
was
hear?
Irvin? What episode he on? Because I
Girl,
be
that's
watching
what I
First
want to know.
48.
We need to go and find out who the hell Herb was. Child.
Irvin was up on the First 48. Yeah.
Girl, the First 48 A&E. Okay. Oh, well. And that, you guys, is the end of chapter 6. And let me always tell you, I have to tell y'all his little lessons learned. In the end of chapter 6, he said his lessons learned is we make choices to survive, but we still have to survive our choices. Choose wisely. And that is the end of chapter 6, you guys. Interesting chapter. So when I said it did pick up a little bit, the chapters did pick up a little bit. We did get some kind of thrilling, information about his childhood. He kind of stopped talking so much about his mama for 2.5 seconds. He got off her dick. And we was able to get some good stories out of him about him being in the world of a hustler. What you think, Sean?
Yeah, I like the book. I think it's picking up. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
mean, honestly, I don't like his style of writing that much for some reason, but
me either.
the book is not
Oh.
bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy read. I don't like the style of writing. He tends to say the same things over and over again,
Right.
FYI. But for the most part, it did pick up a little bit. Is it something that I would want to read again? No. When I get rid of this book and if time prevails, I will be sending this book back to
Oh,
Amazon.com.
no,
Do you hear
you
me?
not,
Yes,
girl.
I am. Yes, I am. I'm gonna get my Skrilla back, and then I'm gonna end up using that towards whatever we come up with for our next book. So, you guys, we still haven't picked our book. Okay, I want you guys to go through the list if you are going to try to pick up reading with us on the next book. The next book will be available on Audibles. It will be available to read on what's I'm gonna call it? Read, Sean. I always forget.
Kindle.
Kindle,
Right.
and you will be able to get a physical book. We did put in a list. Okay, I found out that one of the books that was on the list, I think Larissa told us that it wasn't on Audibles. So we're gonna wipe that one off of the list. If it's not on Audibles, if it's not on Kindle, and you can't purchase the book, we're not gonna read it. We want you guys to be able to have all of the resources available to you so that you can take in and partake in reading this book. Now, again, I still am reading Bob Marley's Mama book, Sidebar. So I will give you, once I get done with reading that book, I will give you my whole reaction to the book and tell you about it. If it's something that you would like to continue to read on your own, we kind of went through this, Marley rabbit hole, and we're gonna end it on Carmani. But I really do like the Mama's book by Sedalia Booker. Marley Booker is her name, and I like that book. But we didn't have enough of the Marley. We really did get on to something else. So if you could be so kind-hearted, to take a look at the list that we put on the Can You Read or Not page and group. It's on both, and tell us, or heart the ones that you're interested in reading. So it makes it easy for us to go through and take a look at those books. And I will double check to make sure before I pick it, that it is a book that we can get on all three levels, Audibles, on Kindle, and the physical form if you like to hold the book. Okay, if you have something that you want us to read, you want to inbox me on either page, or you can email me at can you read or not at outlook.com, and that's CANUREADORNAW at outlook.com if you have something that you want us to take a look at to read. Okay, I hope that everybody does their due diligence and look at the books that we have so that we can make it an easy pick. Going forward, our next week's read, you're going to have to buckle down and read the rest of the book. That's chapter 7 through 10. It's only 10 chapters, y'all. We are at the home run of this
Mm.
book. Okay. Sean?
All right. I'm on it.
7 through 10, the end of the book. Okay. Now I want to
Yeah.
let y'all know at the end of the book, he gives you lyrics to the songs. You don't have to read that unless you want to read that. I'm not reading that. I'm not reading that. Okay. I'm reading the chapters. Okay. I have already
Yeah, I
started
feel you.
reading through. Actually on chapter 8 as of now. I start chapter 8. I'm going to finish this book by this week. You guys finish it up 7 through 10, and we will resume here again Sunday. Let me make sure I got the date. Hold on. I want to tell y'all the actual date because I'm gonna make an event so you guys can keep up with it. But let's see. Today is the 23rd. We're gonna resume back here on the 30th. And I'm going to make the 30th time frame 6 o'clock. Okay, so it will not be at 3, it will be at 6. Is that okay with you, Sean, to change it to 6?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to set an event for us to read October 30th at 6 o'clock for the final chapters of this book, Dear Dad, by Kaimani Marley. Okay. All right. All right. So, with that being said, my book, Aholics, we are out of here. I want y'all
Have a
to
good
have
week,
a
guys.
yeah, have an enjoyable Sunday, getting ready for Monday. You ready for Monday, Sean?
No, no, no.
I ain't either.
Okay, girl.
I am not either. But and we'll see y'all on the chat parts on the book, honey. Y'all in the cub. We'll see you everywhere else we be. All right. We out of here.
All right. Bye.
Peace.